decide to stand as a local councillor, let's say at parish or town level or at unitary authority or county council level, if you're elected, one of the very first things that you'll be expected to do would be to read the Code of Conduct. Now, the Code of Conduct is a guide to behaviour that's expected of you as an elected representative. You will have a role in public life. You're now a public servant, so it is your duty to make sure that you behave appropriately to your role. The Code of Conduct is based on the 7 Nolan principles, and these are principles which Lord Nolan established in 1994. When it was John Major who was the Prime Minister, he announced the establishment of a committee on standards in public life after a lot of issues had occurred within the Conservative government of the time. There'd been a lot of sleaze and a lot of scandal, and John Major decided that this was a good time to look at how public servants were expected to behave. So Lord Nolan drew up these 7 standards, and the 7 standards are selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. And underneath each of those titles sits a little bit of a description about the behaviour that is expected from somebody who's in public life and how they should uphold those 7 principles. Now, all of that is a very good thing. It means that people can be held accountable for their behaviour and their actions. It means that in meetings and outside of meetings, you can expect to be held to account yourself, but also you can hold others to account at that level of behaviour. And it hopefully will minimise some of the behavioural problems that can sometimes arise when you have people who are volunteering effectively for a role. Obviously, if you are a councillor at unitary or county council level, you will be paid for your role. But as a town councillor, I don't get any payment for my role. So in terms of the accountability, it's slightly nebulous. By signing up to the Code of Conduct, though, these 7 principles are embedded within the Code of Conduct, and I am expected to behave accordingly. However, as you may have understood, there is always a trade-off to any behaviour that we embed in our culture, in our society. Let me give you an example. We might decide that it's a great idea to pay people £20 an hour as a minimum wage. The benefit is that those people who are receiving the minimum wage are going to have a great salary, a good income, it's going to pay for a lot of their outgoings, and they'll have a nice standard of living. But the trade-off is that the employers who have to pay it, and if they're working for the public sector, the taxpayer, they'll have a big cost to that employment. So on the one hand, we can see that it would benefit certain sectors of society, but the trade-off is that that extra minimum wage would not benefit other sectors of society. Within the Code of Conduct, there is a trade-off. Embedding these levels of behavioural expectations is all well and good. But I do have a question about what are the trade-offs here? How are we limiting our behaviour? How are we failing perhaps to be as effective as we could be as public bodies, as public servants, in terms of the trade-offs? So some of the trade-offs which I believe may well be present in that Code of Conduct. Number 1, free speech. If we're not able to freely discuss and debate topics because we feel they might offend somebody, or because we feel that they might sort of offend their sensibilities, to what degree do we feel free to be able to discuss those topics, those issues? Number 2, robust debate. Sometimes debates do get lively. I mean, if you've ever watched the House of Commons, you'll see how many of the MPs on either side of the House are very free in terms of their vocalisations, should we say, about the opposition. Well, robust debate is absolutely vital to be able to find the truth in a topic. And prior to the Nolan principles being embedded, if you look back at recordings of the House of Commons from, say, the late 80s, the early 90s, when it was first televised, you'll see the uproar that is very often going on. Since then, it's calmed down a little bit, although even at times it can get very, very lively. But I still think robust debate is absolutely critical. Parliament, the very name, means parler. It comes from the French parler, to talk, to speak. The idea about parliament is that we discuss, we speak, we talk. Number 3, should we as public servants take offence when people call us names, when people speak to us in a rude manner, when people disagree with our opinions? I get that all the time, people disagreeing with me. Well, I've got to grow up, haven't I? I've got to take it on my shoulders, because frankly, if you're going to stand up and be an elected official, you've got to understand and expect that you will get some negative criticism and some feedback. We've got to grow big shoulders. We've got to be, we've got to be the people who can take that and not get offended and not get worked up about it. I do sometimes wonder whether the Nolan principles and possibly the Code of Conduct are saying we cannot be offended, we mustn't be offended. Well, actually, we've got to hear those things. We've got to allow other people the freedom to speak out and to disagree with us. Number 4, to what extent are these codes of conduct or these Nolan principles enabling us to challenge one another, or not allowing us to challenge one another? Challenge, again, is a critical part of debate in society. And by not being able to challenge one another, by other things that have underpinned that as well, such as the Equalities Act, to what degree are we watering down some of those vital debates that we can really discuss things openly and with full passion that many of us bring to those debates? Number 5, the other issue I feel about some of the processes and procedures that are inherent in this kind of understanding of a specific type of behaviour is the system that exists to support your legal right to challenge, your legal right to speak. Within the local authority, there is somebody called a monitoring officer. Now, that monitoring officer is a legal role, and he or she is expected to if you like, navigate, mitigate, deal with any complaints that come through the local channels that aren't dealt with at a local level on the complaints process and have to be escalated. And that person acts as a kind of intermediary, and they'll be the one who will be gathering the evidence for both parties, and they will have to make a final judgment about who was in the wrong, and if it was the public person, the public servant who was in the wrong, what recommendation they would make, whether they have to make a public apology or they have to write to the person who was offended or wronged. And they will decide what the, if you like, what the penalty will be for that particular public servant. I suppose eventually whether in fact that public servant should stand down and their position becomes vacant and maybe another re-election, another election is held. However, that process often takes an awfully long time. Even locally, we have seen the process of a particular complaint taking months and months and months to be resolved. And this is very difficult when you have a complainant that comes and presents their complaint effectively and efficiently and within the timescale, but yet the powers that be don't deal with that complaint correctly. And in fact, where there are no timescales or no time deadlines written into that complaints process, I think that's very egregious. I think for the person who's made that complaint, they expect a quick and fast resolution, certainly as quickly and as efficiently as it can be done, given that there probably are two parties who both have to submit evidence. It has to be heard, it has to be discussed, it has to be dealt with. Nevertheless, I think it's unfair to keep somebody waiting for a long time to get an answer to a complaint. So these are some of the downsides to the Code of Conduct. These are some of the downsides to having a written, if you like, explicit set of rules as to your behaviour as a councillor. However, this shouldn't put you off standing. If you wish to change things, if you are the kind of person who is passionate about what's going on in your locality, maybe in your region, perhaps you've seen what's going on at a national level and you want to be the person locally who's able to stand up for what you believe in and put that voice forward, then I would encourage you to apply. Being a councillor actually is very interesting. There's lots of interesting people you get to meet. There's topics that you never would have thought about before that go on in your local area, and it allows you to make an impact locally. So I would thoroughly encourage you to apply, but just be aware that the Nolan principles and the Code of Conduct are two areas that you will have to learn about and you'll have to utilise, but make sure that other people around you are also adhering to that and use it to your benefit, not to your detriment.